Okay, so hello Year 11. Just going to go through the sample paper. It's worth having a look at it. They will base the exam paper loosely on this. The questions that are on here obviously won't come up, but you can't avoid some of the topics that are on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a bunch of short videos, and then I'll probably do some sort of summary at the end. So 4 pseudocode descriptions and 5 pseudocode statements are shown. Draw a line to link each pseudocode description to the most appropriate pseudocode statement. So we've got, on the left hand side here, we've got some descriptions, and then we've got the statements. So looking at them, we've got some loops and conditional statements. So obviously, you know from what we've done in class, loops are something that's going to repeat. There are 3 types of loop, and then the conditional statements, that is something we've also called selection, making a choice. So let's have a look, see what we've got here. So a loop that will always iterate at least once. So looking at these, hopefully from your revision you can spot that the loops are for to next, if then else and if, that's selection or a conditional statement. While, do, end while, that's another loop. Case of, otherwise, end case, that's another conditional statement, selection. And then repeat until, that's the other loop. So hopefully you've encountered those in the revision, you're already familiar with those. So a loop that will always iterate at least once. So for to next is a loop that we use when we know how many times it's going to run. We call that count controlled. So with a for to next loop, we know exactly how many times it's going to run. So we'll always run a set number of times. So it's not going to be that one. While, do, end while. So this one we call a precondition. This is the precondition loop, because we check the condition at the start, and while the condition is true, we do the loop. If the condition is false at the start for the very first time, we won't do the loop at all. So the while, do, end while loop may not run at all. So it may not iterate at least once. And the word iterate just means to repeat or to loop. So it's repeat until. So what we do is we repeat the stuff we want to repeat, and then at the end we check the condition. So this is called a post condition loop. So the repeat until has to run at least once, and then at the end you'll test the condition, and then if the condition is false at the end of that first iteration, then it'll stop. So it will run at least once. So we've got the 3 types of loop that you need to know. So anyway, let's go ahead and draw a line down to there. A conditional statement to deal with many possible outcomes. So looking at this one, we've got our 2 conditional statements here: if, then, else, and if. And remember, this can also be called selection, just making a choice. Then we've got our other conditional statement: case of, otherwise, end case. So with these, the way that we tend to look at it is if, then, else, and if. We tend to use that if we're just making a straightforward choice. Also, if, then, end, if can process logic as well. Case of, otherwise, end case, we tend to use that one when there are many different outcomes, many different options to choose from. So with this one, it's going to be case of, otherwise, end case. So we can come down to actually look at the one at the bottom here, a conditional statement that deals with a conditional statement with different outcomes for true or false. That's going to be our if, then, else, and if. Okay, so we've got the 2 types of conditional statement, or 2 types of selection. The case statement is where we have many possible outcomes. So I think in the lesson we did one on pizza toppings. So we had maybe 6 or 7 pizza toppings, and depending on the pizza topping that the user chose, it would assign the price of each topping. Whereas the if, then, else, and if, we tend to just use that when there's just a single choice to make, or the answer is dependent on logic. So conditional statement with different outcomes for true and false. So there's a bit of a clue there because they're talking about logic. That's the if, then, else, and if. So lastly, we've got a loop that will always iterate a set number of times. So just describe these 2 loops that were left. So the for to next is a loop. For loop, we use that when we know how many times we want the loop to run. So let's just go ahead and join that one up. And we're left with while, do, end, while. So we're not using that one. And just remember, while, do, end, while is the precondition loop where we test the condition at the start. And then if it's true, we do the loop. If it's false, the loop may not run at all. Okay, so I'll stop recording for this one, and then I'll start the next one for part B.